right. Thank you for having me. Is my sound good? I always get nervous when I'm preaching in a different context, like there's something I have to be doing wrong. But thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it. One of the things that I love about guest preaching is the idea that I get to meet new people and see what God is doing in different congregations. I just love that. So thank you for this honor. One of the things that's difficult about guest preaching is choosing what to talk about because you've got like one shot at this. And it's not like I'm in a sermon series or anything. So I thought that what I would share from today is one of my favorite gospel stories. It's the story of the very first missionary that Jesus sends out. And I don't know about you, but that sounds like a big deal to me, right? Like the first missionary. If I'm choosing the first missionary, I'm thinking like Mother Teresa, right? Like St. Francis of Assisi kind of person, like a Paul of Tarsus post-conversion kind of a person. This is what I'm thinking when I'm thinking the very first missionary. But what Jesus thinks when Jesus thinks first missionary is howling, stark naked graveyard lunatic. That's Jesus' idea. That's his go-to guy when he thinks who's going to be the first one. The first missionary you see is this guy that we call the Gerasene demoniac. Now that's a horrible name, right? That's not what you want on your business cards. Gerasene is bad enough, but that's just where he's from. So that's not great. And then he's a demoniac, which means he's possessed. He's being controlled by something that he can't break free from on his own. He's stuck. This is the story of this guy, and he's the first ever missionary. So I want you to join me in the reading of God's word. If you have your scripture, or if you use your cell phone, or if you just follow along on the screen, we'll be in Luke chapter 8. We're going to start with verse 26. They sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is across the lake from Galilee. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had commanded the impure spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. Jesus asked him, "What's your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him. And they begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them into the abyss. A large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. The demons begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs, and he gave them permission. When the demons came out of the man, they went into the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When those tending the pigs saw what had happened, they ran off and reported this in the town and the countryside. And the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone out, sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people how the demon-possessed man had been cured. Then all the people of the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them because they were overcome with fear. So he got into the boat and left. The man from whom the demons had gone out begged to go with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return home and tell how much God has done for you." And the man replied, "Are you crazy, Jesus? Did you bump your head? Don't you know this is my hometown? They all know me here. I can't possibly be a missionary to the people who know me before I knew you." Wait. Oh, you don't have that in the slide. Is that not in your version? Oh, that must not be there. Let's see what he actually does. "Return home," says Jesus, "and tell how much God has done for you." So the man went away and told all over town how much Jesus had done for him. This is the word of the Lord. And we say, "Be to God." So this is a story about a lot of things. There's a lot going on here, more than we can get into this morning. It's a story about identity, a story about evil, a story about culture, a story about mission. But for me, most of all, this is the story of the day that Jesus goes to the wrong side of the tracks, and he finds the most captive person that he can find, and he sets him free. And to understand this story, and really any story in the Bible, one of the things that I try to teach my people to do is to look for the details, to notice the details. Because one of the things we know in our heads, but we don't always recognize, like with our guts when we read Scripture, is that it wasn't really written for us now. It was written for people 2,000 years ago in a very different culture. So there's a lot of important information in the details. So what we're going to do with the time that we have this morning is to read this story looking for the details. And the first detail I want you to notice is in the very first verse that we read. We read that Jesus sails across the Sea of Galilee to the land of the Gerasenes. Now that doesn't sound like an important detail, right? That sounds like we're just setting the stage. Like if you're reading a script, this is just the information you need to know to get into the story. It doesn't sound like it's a vital detail to understand. But it is a big deal. It's a really big deal because we're not Jews living 2,000 years ago, but if we were, then as soon as we heard this detail, as soon as we heard that Jesus had crossed the Sea of Galilee and he had gone to the land of the Gerasenes, then we would immediately know something very important. We would know that he had left the safe zone. We would know that he had left the holy area where holy people hang out. He has gone into Gentile. And this is a big deal. We would know right away that this is something that's setting up a scene for terrible things to happen. Have you ever watched a scary movie? And you know, if you watch a scary movie, I enjoy bad scary movies. I don't like good scary movies because they're too scary. Bad scary movies are great because when you watch a bad scary movie, you get to like feel the pain and frustration of the stupidity of the character. And that's what Luke is setting up here. He wants us to think, what is Jesus doing? This makes no sense. Why would you go to the land of why would you leave this side of the Sea of Galilee and go over there? And then it just gets worse and worse and worse. Because you know how in a scary movie there's some point where there's like blood dripping from the walls and the girl's like, let's go investigate. But first, let's split up. That's what Jesus is doing here. He's making it worse and worse because first we're going across the sea to the land of the Gerasenes. That's bad enough. The next thing we get introduced to is that we're going to the graveyard. Now, we all think graveyards are spooky, and that's true. For them, it's not about the spooky factor. What would it be if you were an ancient Jewish person and you hear that someone is going to hang out with the dead bodies? It's unclean. It's an abomination. It's something that isn't done, and certainly not by a holy man. So we go across the sea to the land of the Gerasenes. We go to a graveyard and hang out among the tombs. And then pigs get introduced to the story. And by this time, the original Jewish audience is just coming unglued. Because why in the world would a holy man go to the land of Gerasenes, hang out among the tombs, and then spend time with a herd of pigs? This is the worst story you can imagine. And yet, Jesus seems to be on a mission. And so he goes anyway. Now here's the thing. When we start looking for details, it's fun to find the details, but it's not enough to just say, oh, that's an interesting fact. I'm going to put that in my pocket in case I want to impress somebody with these interesting things that I know. The reason why we go looking for details is so that we can ask ourselves, if this is the gospel, if this is how Jesus does church, does mission, what does it mean for us? And so we learn to apply these things to our own lives. And the question that I think we might ask ourselves, knowing this detail, is, are there places that God might call us to which we would be unwilling to go? Are there people that in our minds, they represent the horror movie? God, don't make me love someone like that. Don't send me there. In this increasingly polarized world, what is the other side of the Sea of Galilee for you? And I don't care where you are in any issue, politically, religiously, socially, economically. It doesn't matter. There's someone who's on the other side of the sea from you. And the question is, what do you think when you think about those people? Are they unreachable, unreasonable, and therefore beyond the reach of God? love? Or are they someone that God has called you to pray for, to care what happens to? Are you willing to hang out in the land of the tombs and the pigs? Well, that's just the first verse of this story. So let's see. I'm sure it gets easier. Let's keep going. So the second detail I want you to notice is that Jesus asks for the guy's name, right? This is a big part of the story. He asks for the guy's name. And the only answer that the guy can give him is that his name is Legion. Legion. Now, this should be devastating. This is a devastating detail. We should find this horrible because this man has no identity left. His name isn't Elijah or Isaac or Joe. His name is Legion. He is completely defined by the thing that is holding him down, robbing him of the fullness, of the abundance of life that God has given to us. He's identifying himself according to the thing that is killing him. And here's the thing. I think that most of us are not all that different. Let me give you an example. Kind of silly, but it just happened a couple of weeks ago. This is embarrassing. I almost made it to the age of 40 without ever having cooked a Thanksgiving meal. But this year I failed. So at 39 years old, I finally cooked my first turkey. Never cooked it. I'm not a cook. I don't like doing it. I don't enjoy it. I'm not good at it. But I did it. I had to, and it happened, and it was okay. But there was one point in the process where I was like just trying to make things happen. And my husband, Brett, turns to me and he says, "What did you just say about yourself?" And I had to rewind for a second because I hadn't really done this consciously. I had said, "Oh, Tara, you dim, dumb dummy," which is a weird thing to say about yourself. I don't know where I got it. This is not like how I normally speak. But I was just like talking to myself, and these were the kinds of words I was using about myself. And I think that we do this, right? Now, that's a dumb example. That's a silly kind of a surface thing. But I think that often the way we think of our truest name is sort of according to our deepest failures. I think that we replay videos in our mind that remind us how broken and awful we are without also letting the voice of the Lord speak into our life. You do this? These are the moments when, like, it's late at night, you're in your bed, you're about to fall asleep, and your brain goes, "Hey, you remember that dumb thing you said 3 years ago? Let's think about that for the next 2 hours," right? And you get these things in your mind, and then it turns into this video, and then it gets entrenched deeper and deeper into our brains, and we get stuck. I think we become Legion, right? We accumulate these hurts and these habits and these hang-ups, and we carry them with us, and the longer we live, the more of these we bear with us, and we become Legion, which is exactly what has happened to this man. I want to do just a little exercise with you, if you would. I know this is weird because you don't know me, so you don't have any reason to trust me, but just close your eyes for a moment. And I want you to try to remember what the ugly videos are that play in your mind. What are the go-tos, the things that you call yourself, things that get stuck in your head, the failures that you can't let go of? I want you to call those to mind just for a moment, Next detail. You can open your eyes. One of the most important details of this story is that the only thing Jesus does on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, when he goes to the land of Gerasenes, the only thing that he does, one thing and one thing only, the only thing that he does is to seek out this man, to ask his name, and to set him free. Nothing else. No other ministry, no other details. That's what he does. He crosses a sea to find this man who is stuck with the ugly videos playing in his mind, and he sets him free. And I want you to know this. There is no sea that Jesus would not cross to find you in the place where you feel most broken and most lost, to ask your name and set you free. This is an important truth in this story. The world says the devil is in the details. I think it's God. So there's one last detail. I know we're about out of time. My church, I get to preach like twice the amount of time, so I'm really working at this. One more detail I want to share with you before we go. The last thing we see in this story that I want you to notice is that they were afraid. They were afraid. This is strange to me This is maybe the weirdest reaction. Because what has happened is this guy who has a reputation in town of being a stark, raving mad, naked graveyard lunatic has suddenly become sane and in his right mind. And instead of thanking Jesus and wanting Jesus to stay there with them, they do not rejoice. They become afraid, and they send him away. They ask him to leave. You see, I'm pretty sure this world is not rational or reasonable. I don't think that we should expect that out of people. I don't know what it was like for you when you first came to Jesus, but if you did this as an adult, some of us have just grown up in the church, and that's wonderful. Some of us maybe came to Jesus a little later in life. And one of the things that I noticed for me is that my friends did not rejoice. They were not excited for me. They thought it was weird and strange, and they kind of would rather not be around me so much anymore. See, people fear change, even good change. So this guy used to be a mess. Now he's in better shape than a lot of them are. Now he's dealt with his demons. He's addressed the ugly name he gave himself. He's let Jesus speak a better word into his life. But they're not pleased. And so they ask Jesus to leave. But Jesus has one more card to play. One more thing to do. See, he came all this way for just one man. And that's all he's going to do before he leaves again. But the story doesn't end there. You see, the man, he asks if he can come with Jesus. He wants to be with Jesus now. And Jesus says no. He says, go back and tell all your friends what has happened to you. Go back to the people who knew you then and just let them know you now. That's what I want you to do. Do you ever feel in your heart, I don't know about you, but I'm a pastor, right? It's my job to minister to people, to be among people, to share my faith. But the people that I find that hardest to do with, my own family and my closest friends. I don't know if that's the case for you, but it certainly is for me. It seems to me that those are the people I can't possibly witness to because they know me too well. They know who I was, and they know who I still tend to be, if I'm really honest with myself. They see my flaws really, really clearly. And so I think sometimes we get this in our mind, that the last place we can go to talk about Jesus are the people that we know. But unless what you've done in your life is somehow worse than wandering around stark naked and howling in a graveyard, I'm pretty sure that Jesus still has a mission for you. Because the most powerful testimonies that we have are the ones that come from our lives being changed from recklessness into reckless love. That's our testimony. Just living who you are because you have been called by name by Jesus. And that's the call to you, and I think that's the call from this story, and that's what I hope that you'll think about as your day and your week goes on. So I want to invite at this time Pastor Leaf, if you want to lead us in a word of prayer, and we'll continue.